15 lakh crore rupees. I mean, just hold that number in your head for a second. Try to visualize it.
Yeah, it's an almost incomprehensible amount of money.
Right. And that is the staggering price tag currently sitting on the table just to, keep India's lights on by the year 2047.
Exactly.
And to get their hands on that kind of capital, the government just did the unthinkable. They basically handed the keys to the country's most tightly guarded, highly radioactive, strategically sensitive sector over to the private market.
It is an absolute paradigm shift. I mean, since
Okay.
the Atomic Energy Act of 1962, this sector has been locked behind this impenetrable wall of state monopoly. The government owned the reactors, they built the reactors, and they ran them.
But on December 18th, 2025, that wall came crashing down.
It did, yeah, with the passage of the Atomic Energy Reform Bill, which is widely known as the Shanti Bill.
Right. And you sent us this massive stack of research because you wanted to know what this 15 lakh crore pivot actually means for your investments, for the grid you rely on, and just the broader economy.
Because it touches everything.
It really does. And what we found as we comb through these documents is a complete fundamental rewrite of the nation's infrastructure playbook. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Before we get into how, private corporations are suddenly going to be running nuclear reactors, we have to talk about the ticking clock that forced the government's hand here. Because you don't just abandon a 60-year-old state monopoly for the fun of it.
Yeah, absolutely do not. The reality is that the traditional state-run model was, well, it was mathematically and physically buckling under the pressure of India's future energy demands.
How so?
Well, right now, India's nuclear capacity is sitting at roughly 8 to 9 gigawatts, which, it's a respectable number for a developing program.
Yeah.
But the national target, the non-negotiable baseline to fuel a developed economy by the centennial of independence in 2047 is 100 gigawatts.
Wait, 100? So that is going from 8 to 100 gigawatts in what, about 2 decades?
Yeah, exactly.
To put that in perspective, we are talking about scaling up our nuclear footprint by over 10 times. I mean, that's faster than almost any major infrastructure rollout in history.
And historically, the organization tasked with this was the Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited, or NPCIL.
Yeah.
They're the state-owned entity that basically did all the heavy lifting for decades.
Right.
And they deserve immense credit, right, for proving that India could build and operate pressurized heavy water reactors safely, especially during those decades when India was largely locked out of global nuclear trade following the 1974 Pokhran test.
Oh, for sure. But proving you can build a safe reactor is a very different institutional muscle than mass producing 100 of them on a really tight schedule.
Exactly.
Because if you want proof before the old system kind of hit a wall, you just look at the chronic delays with Kudankulam units 3 through 6.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it takes over a decade to pour the concrete, source the custom parts, navigate the bureaucratic red tape for just one of these mega projects. I look at the old MPCIL-dominated model like a single person trying to build a modern mega city using only their personal savings account and maybe a couple of hired hands.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
It's a noble effort, but structurally impossible. You cannot build a mega city without a massive corporate syndicate.
That is the perfect analogy. If MPCIL is that single person with a savings account, the private sector is the syndicate with the heavy cranes, the global supply chains, and the, advanced procurement leverage.
Right.
Because the gap to reach 100 gigawatts isn't just that staggering 15 lakh crore financial shortfall, though. Make no mistake, public budgetary allocations could never cover that.
No way.
The real gap is execution velocity. The private sector has spent the last 30 years perfecting engineering, procurement, and construction, what we call EPC expertise. They know how to standardize parts, manage sprawling supply chains with thousands of vendors, and, crucially, penalize delays. The government finally realized that to hit 100 gigawatts, they couldn't just throw more tax money at NPCIL, they had to fundamentally change the operational philosophy.
So the state successfully proved the scientific concept, but now they are bringing in private equity and corporate project managers to actually franchise it and scale it across the country.
Exactly, which brings us directly to the mechanics of this new legislation.
Right, the Shanti Bill.
Yeah.
Which stands for Sustainable Harnessing and Advancement of Nuclear Energy for Transforming India. It is engineered specifically to tear down those legal and economic walls.
Precisely. The headline reform is that Indian private companies are now legally permitted to build, own, and operate nuclear power plants.
Wow.
But the secondary clause is perhaps even more massive for the global markets. The bill allows for foreign participation through joint ventures, capping foreign direct investment, or FDI, at 49%.
Okay, private ownership and 49% foreign investment in Indian nuclear plants. Those are massive systemic shifts. But looking through the legal mechanics here, I want to zero in on the most controversial piece of this entire puzzle.
Liability framework.
Yes, because the bill completely removes supplier liability and severely caps the operator's liability. I have to be honest, when I first read that, my jaw dropped.
Yeah, a lot of people had that reaction.
Because capping operator liability and giving suppliers a total legal shield, like if a cooling valve fails and causes a catastrophic meltdown, the company that made the valve isn't liable.
That's right.
That sounds exactly like a corporate free pass subsidized by the public. I mean, how does shielding billionaires from disaster accountability count as a reform?
It is a deeply visceral reaction.
Yeah.
And frankly, it was the exact argument that kept India's nuclear sector completely paralyzed for a decade.
I can see why.
But what's fascinating here is, to understand why this was necessary, we have to look at how liability actually functions in a complex, high-tech, global supply chain. A modern nuclear reactor isn't built by one company.
Right, it's a massive puzzle.
Exactly. A jigsaw puzzle of hundreds of thousands of specialized components from thousands of different suppliers. Let's take your cooling valve example.
Okay.
Say you are a mid-sized domestic manufacturing firm. You make highly reliable aerospace-grade steel valves. The contract to supply those to a nuclear plant might bring you, say, $50,000 in profit.
Right, a decent contract, but nothing earth-shattering for a company.
Exactly. But under India's old liability laws, if that valve failed, you as the supplier could be held liable for infinite, unquantifiable damages, billions of dollars.
Oh, wow.
So what did the suppliers do?
Well, they just walked away. I mean, a $50,000 profit isn't worth risking the entire existence of your company.
They absolutely walk away. Both domestic heavy engineering firms and massive international players refused to bid on Indian nuclear contracts. The risk-to-reward ratio was completely broken.
Okay, that makes sense.
So the Shanti Bill reform aligns India with the International Convention on Supplementary Compensation, or the CSC.
Okay, so how does the CSC actually fix that without just leaving the public holding the bag if something goes wrong?
The CSC operates on a principle of legal channeling and pooled international insurance. It channels all absolute legal liability exclusively to the operator of the plant, not the thousands of suppliers.
Oh, I see.
So the supplier of the valve is off the hook. Then it places a strict financial cap on the operator's liability.
But wait, if the operator's liability is capped, what happens to the victims if the damages exceed that cap? Because disasters get expensive fast.
That is where the international mechanism kicks in. Because the liability is strictly capped, global insurance conglomerates can actually mathematically price the risk and underwrite the policy.
Ah, because infinity can't be insured.
Exactly. If an accident happens, the operator's insurance pays out up to the cap. If damages exceed that cap, the national government steps in. And if it goes even higher, the CSC unlocks an international pool of funds contributed by all member nations to compensate victims.
Wow.
It creates a predictable, stable environment for investors while ensuring a massive, multi-tiered pool of capital is ready for public compensation.
Ah, so it's not about letting corporations off the hook. It's about making the risk insurable.
Yes.
Because if the liability is infinite, no insurance company will touch it, which means if a disaster happens, the victims are just trying to sue a bankrupt company anyway. By capping it and joining the CSC, you actually guarantee that the money is there. That fundamentally changes how I view this clause.
Exactly. It plugs India into a globally recognized compensation framework. It's a pragmatic compromise.
Yeah.
You basically trade the illusion of infinite supplier accountability for the reality of getting these zero-carbon power plants actually built and insured.
Okay, but, and this is a big but shifting liability, and inviting private, profit-driven money into a highly radioactive space inevitably introduces massive, terrifying new safety incentives.
Oh, absolutely. It's a valid concern.
Because if an operator's liability is capped, a bad actor might be tempted to, cut corners on safety protocols to boost their quarterly profit margins. You can't just throw open the doors to foreign joint ventures and say, have fun, guys. So who is the referee here?
Right.
Who is making sure these private equity-backed reactors don't turn into a regulatory Wild West?
That referee is the Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, or the AERB. And the Shanti Bill does something vital here. It provides the AERB with statutory backing. It drastically upgrades their independent oversight powers.
Wait, didn't the AERB already exist? Why is giving them statutory backing suddenly a game changer?
They did exist, yes.
Yeah.
But we have to look at their historical operating environment. For decades, the AERB functioned more as an advisory body operating under the umbrella of the Department of Atomic Energy. And the Department of Atomic Energy essentially ran the state-owned NPCIL. Do you see the conflict of interest there?
Oh, wow. So the government was basically regulating itself. The agency building the reactors was in the same administrative food chain as the agency supposed to be policing them.
Precisely. And when everything is under the umbrella of state security, those blurry lines are sort of tolerated.
Right.
But the moment you introduce private, profit-seeking corporate entities into a dual-use technological space, that old setup becomes incredibly dangerous.
Very.
So moving the AERB to a fully independent, legally empowered statutory body with actual punitive teeth ensures that safety is never compromised for a dividend payout.
See, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Because this newly muscled up AERB isn't just going to be regulating the massive, sprawling concrete domes we are used to. This legislation specifically creates a legal runway for deploying next-gen technology, like small modular reactors, or SMRs, and Farad small reactors.
Yes. And the SMR technology is the real reason the 49% FDI cap is so critical. SMRs are a complete departure from traditional nuclear engineering.
Right, because if you think of traditional nuclear plants, they are bespoke, custom-built mega projects. Every single one is a unique engineering challenge that takes 15 years to finish.
There.
But SMRs, they are more like plug-and-play batteries, right?
Yeah.
Break down exactly how these things are manufactured compared to the old way.
Think of it like the difference between building a custom mansion on-site versus manufacturing cars on an assembly line.
Okay.
An SMR is designed to be built in a controlled factory environment. You manufacture the entire reactor module on an assembly line, standardizing every single weld and valve.
Wow.
And you load that uncompleted module onto an 18-wheeler truck or train, ship it to the site, and plug it in. If you need more power later, you just ship another module and plug it in next to the first one.
That is mind-blowing. You're completely eliminating the on-site construction variables, like the weather delays, the concrete curing issues, the bespoke engineering flaws. It's assembly line nuclear power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this circles back to why foreign joint ventures are essential right now. While India's domestic scientists are brilliant, the global commercialization of factory-line SMRs is being aggressively pioneered by companies in the West and in East Asia.
Right.
So by allowing up to 49% foreign investment, India is essentially inviting these global frontrunners to set up their assembly lines on Indian soil.
Okay, so essentially we are paying a 49% equity tuition fee to learn how to build these things ourselves. That completely changes how I view foreign investment here. It's not just about taking their money, it's about absorbing their manufacturing processes.
That is the exact analytical layer we need to apply here. And it transitions us perfectly into the grand strategy behind all of this. Because this isn't just about electricity. This is about interlinking climate resilience, macroeconomic stability, and national autonomy.
Right, let's step back and look at the macro picture. If you are listening to this on your commute or at your desk and you're wondering why you should care about a nuclear policy bill, this is about the foundation of the economy you live in and the air you breathe.
Absolutely.
Because expanding nuclear baseload power is absolutely non-negotiable if India is going to hit its commitment to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2070.
That 2070 target is the ultimate strategic anchor. We hear a lot about solar and wind power, and they are phenomenal, crucial technologies.
But they are intermittent.
Exactly. The sun sets, the wind stops blowing. You cannot run heavy industries, data centers, and a rapidly urbanizing grid of over 1 billion people purely on energy sources that fluctuate with the weather. You need baseload power. Massive, uninterrupted, constant energy.
And traditionally that has been coal.
Yes, nuclear provides that same constant heavy-duty baseload power, but with zero carbon emissions.
And by scaling up nuclear, India dramatically reduces its reliance on imported fossil fuels, which is a massive win for the trade deficit. But I have to push back on the geopolitical angle the source materials are pushing here, because the brief talks about how this reform effectively shifts India's posture toward true strategic autonomy.
Okay.
But wait. If we are shutting down coal plants to build nuclear reactors, and those reactors are funded by up to 49% foreign capital and built using foreign SMR technology, are we actually achieving strategic autonomy? Or are we just trading our reliance on foreign oil cartels for a reliance on foreign nuclear tech corporations?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, The definition of strategic autonomy in the 21st century has evolved.
How so?
It no longer means building everything in isolation within your own borders. It means controlling the ecosystem and the supply chains. By integrating foreign capital and advanced technology now through these joint ventures, India is rapidly building its domestic capacity for the future.
I see.
Indian engineers are learning the factory floor mechanics of SMRs. Indian steelmakers are learning to forge nuclear-grade components. You intertwine national security, climate resilience, and economic growth into one cohesive governance pattern.
Right.
You are absolutely trading short-term reliance on foreign tech for the long-term capability to manufacture it independently.
It's an aggressive play. But as we comb through all these documents, any honest analysis has to look at the red flags. And there are some glaring ones here.
There always are.
Privatizing a radioactive dual-use sector introduces profound new vulnerabilities that the government is going to have to manage very carefully.
The single biggest immediate vulnerability is fuel security.
Oh, okay, break that down.
India has ambitious plans to scale to 100 gigawatts, but currently, its domestic uranium reserves are relatively modest and, well, of lower quality. This means India remains highly dependent on long-term, specialized uranium imports from nations like Kazakhstan and Canada.
Wait, going back to my last point, we're trying to reduce our dependence on imported oil and coal to be self-reliant, but to run these new SMRs, we have to import uranium from Kazakhstan and Canada. Aren't we literally just trading an OPEC vulnerability for a uranium vulnerability? Like, if supply chains freeze or geopolitical tensions flare up, our brand new 100 gigawatt grid could be starved of fuel.
It is the glaring paradox of the current strategy. And it is exactly why the policy documents emphasize accelerated research and development into thorium-based reactors.
Right. I saw thorium mentioned several times. Break down how thorium actually solves this, because it sounds like a magic bullet on paper. India has massive domestic reserves of thorium, right?
India has some of the largest reserves of thorium in the world, primarily in the monazite sands of coastal regions like Kerala.
Wow, okay.
But thorium isn't a magic bullet because of the physics involved. Uranium-235 is fissile, meaning if you hit it with a neutron, it splits, releases energy, and creates a chain reaction all on its own. Thorium is what we call fertile, not fissile.
Meaning it can't start a chain reaction by itself?
Exactly. You have to bombard thorium with neutrons from a different fissile material like plutonium or enriched uranium to transmute it into uranium-233, which then actually fuels the reactor.
Oh, that sounds complicated.
It is an incredibly complex, multi-stage nuclear cycle that India has been working on for decades. Thorium is the ultimate long-term play to completely break that import dependence and achieve true fuel autonomy.
But until then...
Until that complex technology reaches commercial maturity, India has to manage the interim vulnerability of relying on Canadian and Kazakh uranium.
And fuel supply isn't the only headache. Reading through the public response to the Shanti bill, there has been fierce political and social pushback.
Oh, absolutely.
Trade unions, environmental groups, and even some retired nuclear scientists have raised serious alarms about privatizing a strategic sector. They are deeply worried about whether safety oversight will actually hold up when corporate profit motives enter the picture, regardless of how strong the AERB is on paper.
It's a completely valid public concern. Nuclear energy is inherently unforgiving. If a solar panel fails, you lose power. If a nuclear reactor fails due to a corporate cost-cutting measure, you lose a city. So how does the government bridge this implementation gap? The policy framework relies heavily on robust public-private partnership, or PPP models.
Right, because you can't just pass a law and expect private companies to start pouring billions into reactors without financial certainty.
Exactly. The government has to establish ironclad power purchase agreements, essentially guaranteeing that the state grid will buy the electricity generated by these private reactors at a fixed tariff for the next 40 to 60 years.
Oh, I see.
This long-term risk sharing is the only way a private consortium can justify the massive upfront capital cost. Furthermore, the state retains ultimate control over nuclear material accounting and physical security through the Department of Atomic Energy.
Okay, so it's not a total handover.
No, it is a delicate, continuous balancing act between empowering private enterprise to move quickly and enforcing draconian national security imperatives.
So what does this all mean? Let's pull all these threads together for a rapid synthesis of everything we've just unpacked. You wanted to know how India is going to power its future. The answer is a monumental target of 100 gigawatts of nuclear capacity by 2047.
Yep.
But the state-run NPCIL model couldn't scale fast enough, hitting a 15 lakh crore financial and operational wall.
And to shatter that wall, The government passed the Shanti Bill in December 2025. This legislation rewrites 60 years of atomic history by inviting private companies to build and operate reactors and allowing up to 49% foreign direct investment.
Right, and to make sure those investors actually show up, the bill aligns India with the global CSC framework, capping operator liability and shielding suppliers so the massive risks can actually be mathematically insured.
And to ensure safety isn't sacrificed for profit, the regulatory watchdog, the AERB, was given independent statutory teeth. This paves the way for the deployment of factory-built, plug-and-play, small, modular reactors, leveraging foreign tech to build domestic manufacturing muscle.
And strategically, this is the engine for India's clean energy transition. It replaces imported fossil fuels with zero-carbon baseload power, managing interim uranium imports from Kazakhstan while pushing toward a self-reliant future fueled by domestic thorium sands.
That is the complete macro picture.
For you, as you track India's economic trajectory, worry about climate change, or analyze global supply chains, this single piece of legislation changes everything. It is a massive high-wire pivot from state control to private agility.
It really is.
But, as we always do on this show, we can't leave you with a perfectly wrapped package. Whenever you solve one massive problem, you inevitably create entirely new, unmapped vulnerabilities.
And that brings us to a crucial, unaddressed question stemming from the very core of these reforms. We've established that private corporate entities, potentially with up to 49% foreign ownership, will soon be building, operating, and managing India's nuclear reactors and the software that runs them. So what happens to the highly sensitive data, the intellectual property, and the physical security of these radioactive plants if one of these joint ventures experiences a hostile corporate takeover by an adversarial financial group?
Oh, man.
Or worse, what happens to the plant's operations if India experiences a severe geopolitical fallout with a partner country supplying that 49% foreign capital?
That is a chilling scenario to consider. When you mix the ruthlessness of corporate boardroom drama with the physical reality of nuclear material, the stakes are unimaginably high. It's something you definitely need to keep your eye on as this 15 lakh crore experiment moves from paper to reality. Keep questioning those big shifts happening in the world around you, because the underlying mechanisms, the how and the why, always matter. Thanks for exploring this with us, and we'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.